Welcome to InSight. I'm Wendy Brokaw. Psilocybin is now legal in Oregon, but only to be used as medicine. What does this mean? Who gets to use it and how? And how are we going to follow its progress and make sure that it's safe? Today, we have some answers for you. I am pleased to have as our guest today, Angela Allbee. She is Oregon Psilocybin Services Section Manager at Oregon Health Authority. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much, Wendy. I'm happy to be here.
Well, a number of people might be saying about the rules, what took you so long? And others might say, how did you get it done so fast? So I'm
Yes.
sure you're in the middle of everything and it's all settled and running as you expect, right?
Yeah, it's going really well. And, to your statement about the rules, I think that it's really important that we have a robust rulemaking process, one that considers feedback from, of course, our Oregon Psilocybin Advisory Board and the 5 subcommittees that organized to provide recommendations to the full board for approval, but also to acknowledge the rules advisory committees and all of the work that went into that discussion, to really honor and respect the public comment period, which we wanted to be robust, and we had lots of public hearings available as well. But then there's another part of the process, and that's some of the meetings that we take with folks who would prefer not to be in a public meeting, but have a lot to say about this work, specifically communities that have been left out of the conversation for many years, maybe perhaps Indigenous communities that want to have community circles, as well as others. We've met with many different groups, and we'd like to, we like to understand that feedback. We've also had public listening sessions, and so the rulemaking process, is really robust, and it did take some time. But we also pulled together that rulemaking timeline in late 2021 and made that public, and then really worked hard to expedite certain rules in the beginning of 2022, and then adopt all of the rest of the rules by the end of last year, which also ended our development period. So it's been going very well. We started accepting applications on January 2nd for licenses. We had already been accepting applications for training program approval on June 6th of 2022. And so it's just been a tremendous effort by an amazing team. And we've done it at about 50% staffing capacity. So we're really looking forward to finishing developing out our team over the next few months, and really help continue to support all of our applicants.
There must have been some issues that really took center stage with you, real challenges. Can you name one or two?
There's so many priority conversations, whether it be something that surrounds client safety. There was a huge concern because there have been, in the unregulated space, reports of abuse by those folks that were providing services to people. And so we've really taken a look at client safety from lots of different levels, from, the entire experience, from the preparation session all the way until the integration sessions. So that's been a huge issue for us, and one that we really wanted to be sure that we were thoughtful about. I think there's, also been concerns over product types and, starting too big, since this is not a dispensary model. Folks won't be able to go into a store, purchase products, and take them off site with them. This is very much a process that centers on, the support that people are receiving, the preparation, the minimal requirements and rule during the administration process, and then all of that support, and the potential for, ways to help someone integrate their experience that really creates a meaningful journey.
And speaking of which, we're talking about a journey, an hallucinogenic journey, but psilocybin itself can be dangerous under some conditions. And some people might wonder, well, just how safe is this entire operation if there's any possibility that somebody could suffer a lethal dose?
Yeah, so I'm going to address your question and your comment in a number of ways. First, you're absolutely correct that psilocybin is still a Schedule One substance under the Controlled Substances Act and is still federally illegal. There are a number of concerns about psilocybin, and a lot of that having to do with maybe the experience of cannabis regulation. We know that psilocybin is not a plant kingdom member, it's a member of the fungal kingdom, and that it grows around the world naturally, all over the world, including in the Pacific Northwest. So there's been a long history of unregulated psilocybin use. And that stems back thousands of years with indigenous communities and many spiritual, religious, and ceremonial practices, as well as some places doing a similar model to psilocybin services and practicing that in places where psilocybin is not illegal. So, what we have the challenge of is coming forward and creating this regulatory framework for psilocybin services that really draws a line around these spaces and helps people understand how it can be done safely. And part of demonstrating safety has to do with the product testing, making sure that people understand we're starting with one species. There are over 200 species of psilocybin that grows naturally around the world, and so we're starting with one at the recommendation of our Oregon Psilocybin Advisory Board. That's Psilocybe cubensis. We have 4 product types, all natural cultivation, all indoor cultivation. And those products have to be tested also for potency. So the psilocybin analyte, people will know how much psilocybin exists in that product. In addition to that, we have a lot of information for clients in that preparation session and some rules that I just want to highlight. There is a prohibition if someone has taken lithium in the past 30 days. We have sufficient evidence that shows that people who have taken lithium and it's still in their system should not consume psilocybin. So that's one of the exclusions in this model that we developed in our rules. The other is if someone has a current, sort of ideation of harming self or others, that would exclude them from being able to be a part of this work, as well as an active psychosis sort of diagnosis. That said, there are certain parts of that client intake process and the client information form that would recommend that a licensed facilitator talk to a client about working with their providers if they're on, multiple pharmaceutical medications and concerned about contraindications, or perhaps had, complex diagnoses that might benefit from other conversations with other providers. So there's a lot of flexibility there in that preparation session. There's also informed consent, safety and support planning. There's also transportation planning. No one will be able to leave an administration session and operate heavy machinery or drive home. But the other thing I want to highlight is that this is not just for the consumption of psilocybin that's hallucinogenic. There are lower dose administration sessions that we allow in our rules. And so those are considered sub-perceptual doses where people don't feel the effects of the psilocybin analyte. And for any dose, there's a minimal requirement to stay at a licensed service center for a certain duration of time. And that's just a minimal requirement. It might mean that a client needs to stay for a little longer before the licensed facilitator and the client determine that it's okay to, be released from that session. But I just want to highlight a couple of those pieces because what you brought up is very important. We've heard from lots of folks with concerns, and we've tried to really address those by being thoughtful about the minimal requirements in our rules.
And thank you for that, because now we're going to go to exactly how psilocybin is going to be administered and where, who gets it, and who gets to give it. So can you walk us through the process from the moment somebody, a client, as you call them, shows up to their first session, and take us from there?
Sounds
Where
great.
will it be? Where will it be?
Yes. So if a client is interested in accessing psilocybin services, first we would recommend that, they find a service center that really meets their needs, that has an approach that will make them comfortable. Something that's really been important is what's called set and setting. It's the internal stimuli or environment, and the external factors or environment that causes stimuli. the internal and external factors can affect your psilocybin journey. And so you want to make sure that if you want to go put your feet in the grass, that you have a service center that allows that to happen. Or if you want to ensure that you have a quiet space, that you have a service center that, can provide that for you. Everyone's going to be different. We do allow for one-on-one sessions as well as group administration sessions. There are client facilitator ratios. So I think a client has to really think about what they want to get, what intentions they want to set, what they want to get out of their sessions, and what kind of service center would meet their needs. Once they determine that, we do have on our website a verification page where someone can take a license number and license type and ensure that they've been licensed through the state and it's a legal operation, if that's something that they're concerned about. Then what begins is they will make an appointment with a licensed facilitator and they will start a preparation session. This is a time when client information, informed consent, safety and support planning, and transportation planning happen, kind of what I just talked about a bit ago. And that's a really important time, again, for a facilitator to determine whether or not they can provide services to that client, or if the client wants to continue forward, or maybe they want to hold off and they want to think about it a little bit more. So that's a really important time for preparation. After that preparation process, and that doesn't have to happen at a licensed service center. We've allowed video conferencing, or they can meet offsite. But then, they would schedule time at a licensed service center. I'll get into the license requirements in just a moment, but the licensed service center is the only place where psilocybin can be sold to a client and consumed by a client. That has to happen at the licensed service center and before the administration session begins. The facilitator doesn't sell the sell the product to the client or administer the product to the client. That's the service center sells to the client, and the client self-administers. If they do have any issues, accessibility or other needs related to self-administering the psilocybin, there is an opportunity to have a support person with them that can help them, whether that's with toileting, mobility, administration, and those types of needs, as well as, working with medical devices, or even for interpretation. So that's a part of this work as well. But that administration session, again, all of the factors, if they're going to participate one-on-one, in group, or what dosage they're going to take, that's going to be something that the preparation session is really important, an important conversation and time to kind of make that determination. And then they stay at that service center for a minimal amount of time. The licensed facilitator then will check up on a client, within 72 hours. That can be just a phone call for, just wellness check, making sure that they're doing okay. And then also a time where a client can schedule follow-up integration sessions. And those are very important ways to integrate their experience, be referred to community, peer support, or other resources, and also a time for them to have additional referrals. I see that you've had a couple of questions, so I'll come back to the license requirements as well as the product chain of custody, but I want to make sure I answer your question.
No, as a matter of fact, it's fascinating to me. I thought these were to be guided sessions, and now it sounds much more like somebody comes in, they purchase a dose, I think they do, and it's administered to them. And then after that, they're kind of on their own. That's what it sounds like.
No, so they will be in the presence, the entire administration session, they'll be in the presence of a licensed trained facilitator. It's important not to use the word guide because Measure 109 creates non-directive approaches to psilocybin services, meaning that no one will be, doing any kind of psychotherapy, or basically controlling their session. This is a time where clients, sort of create their own journeys based on the experience they're having with the psilocybin products, but they will be in the presence of licensed and trained facilitators. That's a requirement. It's just a non-directive approach. The other piece is there's a separation between who sells the product and how the client takes the product. I do want to mention that there are 4 product types that we've allowed in our rules. So people will be able to purchase dried whole mushrooms, ground homogenized fungi, that can be encapsulated, stirred into teas, or stirred into chocolate, perhaps. We know there's a variance in the psilocybin analyte in a whole dried mushroom. And so part of the product information as well as the preparation session will be to talk about that a little bit. They can also purchase extracts or edible food products. So there will be those types of products. We do have possession limits. So there's only a certain amount of psilocybin that a licensed manufacturer can have on site, a licensed service center can have on site. And that's just a way to comply with production limits that we established, that Measure 109 established, and that we've upheld in our rules. So I want to talk a little bit about the product chain of custody, just to give you a little heads up about that. Psilocybin will be cultivated indoors. Many people believe that psilocybin production will look like cannabis, and that's actually very different. Psilocybin cultivation happens in a much smaller space and doesn't take the same amount of electricity, water, or other resources to be cultivated. And so, you can have a smaller operation that can provide a significant amount of psilocybin. And so that's just important to note. It's very different, doesn't use the same amount of resources. And actually, if you look in our rules, you can find out more about, kind of that sort of licensed premises. But the licensed manufacturer, once they cultivate products and prepare and process products, they will send to licensed testing labs to be tested for speciation, to ensure that Psilocybe cubensis is detected, and then also for potency, so that we know how much psilocybin analyte is in that particular product. If they're doing extracts, the licensed manufacturers, then solvent testing will occur as well. Now, at any time, we can determine that we might need additional testing, pesticide testing, heavy metal testing, or microbial testing. That's not required initially, but if we go, pesticides are prohibited, but if we go in and see them there, we're going to want to, do some pesticide testing. And so that's just something to keep in the back of all of our minds as we're moving forward in this work. Once that product has been tested, and all of those results are in our product tracking system, a licensed manufacturer can sell products to the licensed service center, and then they will keep those products on site depending on how many clients they're serving, and then that's when they'll sell those products to the client. So that's the chain of custody of the products. Thought it was important to mention, and I'm also happy to talk about who will these facilitators be, if that's something that you're interested in.
Very much so. Thank you so much. And you've given me a much fuller picture of this. And when I was thinking of guided, I was really interested to know if that was the case. And I'm so glad that you clarified that. So thank you. It's not guided. They're just there to help. I have been wondering if somebody who is a first-time user of psilocybin, I had heard that it's possible that somebody who's doing it for the first time might have what's called a bad trip because they're taking it for the first time. Can you clear that up for us?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think it's important to acknowledge that there's no defined term for bad trip. I think it's about expectations. So if someone's going into this and hasn't been properly prepared, they might expect something and be surprised by it. And so I think the term bad trip can come from a lot of consumption in the unregulated space where someone hasn't been prepared and hasn't set intentions and doesn't understand the set and setting that they're walking into in order to have their experience. Now, some people might, get sick to their stomach when they take psilocybin. There's different product types to choose from. So if someone doesn't want to chew up dried whole mushrooms, they have other ways that they can also take those products. But there's some people might get headaches. There might be other effects. It's not everyone, and everyone's experience is going to be different. Sometimes things might come up that are a little scary for someone, and part of the work of the facilitator is going through training specifically to understand how to help support a client during all of these experiences, whether they be beautiful and positive or emotional or really terrifying or everywhere in between. You could have all of those that happen during a psilocybin journey.
Who do you expect to be your main client base? What people do you think are going to be most apt to be using your services?
Well, I mean, there are so many people that have interest. We've talked to just, there's a huge number of people interested in accessing services here in Oregon, outside of Oregon. We think it's very important that people are able to access services here. And so part of our requirements are that we're requiring licensees to have social equity plans where they're providing a commitment to serving people, especially, those populations such as low-income populations, rural folks, people from communities of color that have experienced race-based and other traumas, veterans. There's so many different ways that you can create social equity plans and focus on making sure that people have access to services. Cost could be prohibitive because insurance doesn't cover psilocybin services at this time. And so something that, some folks that are hoping to set up service centers are thinking about are if they're going to create their own sliding scale model or using certain donated funds to help subsidize cost of services. As of right now, because Measure 109 is a fee-based structure, meaning that the licensing fees have to cost or cover the cost of our work, there's no additional funds to help subsidize services for clients. And so I think it's important that we demonstrate that we can do this work very safely and effectively, and also ensure that as people are interested, we're looking to work with our advisory board and members of the public and partners to create social equity considerations as we move forward.
Microdosing. I'd like it explained and to see if that is something that fits that model of access and equity. Microdosing, what is it?
Well, microdose is a term that means many things to many people, and it's not used in Measure 109. So I'm going to pivot to lower dose administration sessions. That's what fits within the Measure 109 model. We've heard from a lot of people that really wanted to allow for lower dose administration sessions and less time at a licensed service center because those doses would be subperceptual. And so what we've done is we've created a dosage and duration model in our rules, and you can find that by visiting our website. Ultimately, for a subperceptual dose that you would take between a certain amount, you would stay at the licensed service center for an hour for your very first subperceptual dose. If you take the next time around, if you take half of that dose, or even if you begin with half of that subperceptual dose, then you can stay for a shorter period of time, a minimum of 30 minutes. And there's some other requirements in the rules I won't get too far into. The point is we've allowed for those lower dose administration sessions. So if someone, because of cost or because they're just wanting to start small and just very gently, dip their toes into the water, they're able to do that. We want this to be centered on clients accessing services in the way they need to. And we feel like there's a really unique opportunity to provide culturally responsive services to communities around the state, whether that be, for certain communities, veterans, others. It's really important that people have that option.
What does it cost to access your services?
These services are provided by licensees, not by the agency. And so licensees will determine the cost of their products and services. We don't regulate that. And so I wouldn't be able to speak on behalf of licensees. Specifically, they're still trying to understand their own cost at this time. But I've heard lots of different ranges and quotes, and I think it's really going to depend on what that service center offers, where they're located, how long, and some other factors. So I'm hoping we'll have some more information soon.
And what does it cost to become a facilitator, a trained facilitator?
Yeah. First of all, if someone wants to be a licensed facilitator, they have to be 21 years of age or older, they have to have a high school diploma or equivalent, and they have to pass a criminal background check. They also have to complete a psilocybin facilitator training program that has had a curriculum approval by OHA, the Oregon Health Authority. The curriculum is based off of lots of knowledge about psilocybin services and training in psychedelics, and really came from recommendations from the Oregon Psilocybin Advisory Board, discussions from rules advisory committees, and then the public. So those can be found in our rules. And I think it's important to note that all of these questions that you've had about, supporting a client, that's something that these facilitators, future facilitators, are going to be learning how to do. The other piece of this is there's core training hours and practicum that are braided into the overall curriculum of the program. And because it's a cohort model for safety purposes, a lead educator will have to sign off on, a student's ability to move forward. And we will need to see that before we will issue a license once someone applies. Now, it's really important also to remember that licensed facilitators may be folks that also hold professional licenses here in Oregon. And so, it's really up to the licensing boards for those professionals on if there's any risks associated with being licensed under Measure 109 and under another license type. However, we've made sure that we've separated the scope of practice. So if someone is licensed in another professional license type, they wouldn't be able to practice that license type under Measure 109. But of course, you might have years of experience working with people in trauma, and some of that experience can really be helpful, as you're supporting folks here under Measure 109. We think that we really hope we're going to have representation from lots of lived and professional experience around the state, so that we've got a lot of opportunities to serve many different groups of people and all of their unique needs. To be a facilitator, they would have to complete the training programs. We have a list of the approved training programs on our website. We don't have the cost, but there are links to those training programs for more information. So that would be a cost to someone that would want to be licensed. And then there's an annual license fee of $2,000. We have provided a 50% reduction opportunity for people that fit criteria as being low income or a veteran status. So we wanted to make sure that we were able to look at reduction in licensing fees. And we also know that facilitators could be employees of service centers or independent contractors. And so there might be many different ways that this could play out. And we wanted to provide flexibility so that licensed facilitators are also leading healthy lifestyles, and they're able to work with their service centers on what meets their needs as well, because we know it's important to have healthy people supporting others that want to access services.
Voters in 2020 made clear through measures 109 and 110 that they wanted to get rid of a kind of a model that treats drug use and possession as a crime, and turn it into instead a model that is a health model. This is what's happening right now. Am I correct? Getting away from crime and turning to thinking of it as a health matter.
Absolutely. So I can't speak on behalf of Oregon voters specifically, but I can say that something that's tremendous and historic and a very important shift is we're moving away from a punitive model created by the war on drugs and other policies that later on have shown to be harmful to certain folks who are vulnerable or underserved or unserved. And really moving that into a health policy framework that considers the potential health and wellness. And I think by doing so, wrapping people in supports and services is really essential to healing and to just overall health and wellness. So my hope is that we all continue learning and also stay open, because I think there's a lot of potential in the way that we think about, substances and their uses. And, some very harmful and many very harmful, but under certain conditions can be helpful. We know this through the pharmaceutical model and, the potential for psychedelics and specifically psilocybin to be helpful. We're hoping to really demonstrate we can do that safely and ultimately at the end of the day that we're providing opportunities for a healthier Oregon and healthier communities.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that. I know that other states are looking at Oregon's model and seeing how you do. We'll be getting back in touch with you on this and keeping track of how it's going as it goes down the road. Thank you. We've been talking to Angela Allbee, Oregon Psilocybin Services Section Manager at Oregon Health Authority. Thank you so much for joining us today on InSight, Angie. It's been great.
Thank you so much, Wendy. Have a great day.
And thank you for joining us on InSight. I'm Wendy Brokaw.